It's officially MLB rumor season, which is both a thrilling time of year and also one that feels like I'm wasting a lot of time, because the second somebody signs with a team, all those rumors detailing where they could have gone are useless. So let's change the approach slightly. In this video, we're going to dig into a pair of free agent pitcher fits based specifically on what those organizations do from a data perspective that stands out. So even if these guys don't end up with these specific teams, at least we've learned something about what those organizations prefer. Let's start with the team that I know pretty well, given that my full-time job is working for Marquee Sports Network, the Chicago Cubs. We've seen the Max Fried to the Cubs rumors, and they make a lot of sense. The Cubs could use a top-end starting pitcher next to Justin Steele and Shota Imanaga, and they haven't really shopped at the top of the market for free agents in most of Jed Hoyer's tenure. Fried represents the bottom of the A tier of free agent pitchers, in my opinion, maybe ahead of Jack Flaherty if you want to get specific. And there's a big gap between Fried and the start of the next SP tier, which consists of guys like Shane Bieber, Sean Manaea, and Yusei Kikuchi. But Fried makes sense for another reason. The Cubs love non-standard fastballs. By that, I mean pitches that cut more than average. The Cubs don't really stand out as a distinct fastball organization if you were to look at the minor leagues specifically. They throw a lot of fastballs, and they throw them hard, but their aggregate fastball shape is more two-plane than the cut that I'm highlighting. At the major league level, we do have some objective support of this angle. The Cubs' four-seam fastballs had the third lowest amount of arm side run in 2024, and they were inside the top two lowest in both 2022 and 2023. If you just glance at some of the arms they have in the majors that have come through their organization, there's a lot of this cut feature on their four-seam shape. Justin Steele, Porter Hodge, Keegan Thompson. You could even go to their top three pitching prospects in Cade Horton, Brandon Birdsell, and Brody McCullough. And if you want to go even deeper, some of their high minors relief arms like Zach Lee and Ben Leeper. I think the Cubs like this shape for two reasons. The first is that it may just be undervalued by the league as a whole. Public stuff models often don't love this cut fastball shape. They routinely grade it out below average. I think this is a byproduct of this shape not doing a great job of missing bats. Instead, the advantage of the cut shape is that it stays off barrel and can limit contact quality pretty well. The second reason is more of a chicken or the egg situation. It may not actually be that the Cubs like this fastball shape. It may be that they really want good slider shape. And good slider shape is hard with a lot of sweep. Those guys are normally those that are more supinated at release. If you give a guy that's more supinated at release a standard four-seam grip, their natural tendency is going to be to create this cut shape, to cut the ball a bit. So it's maybe not that they like the fastball shape. It may just be that the sliders they prefer result in this fastball shape. And Max Fried is a great example of this cut ride in this class of free agent pitchers. Compare his four-seamer to that of the average left-handed four-seam fastball, and the difference is obvious. Among all left-handed pitchers last season, there were just 4 pitchers who had a fastball that averaged below 4 inches of arm side movement that they threw over 500 times. If the Cubs sign Max Fried, they would have 2 of those arms heading into the 2025 season and 3 left-handed starting pitchers in their rotation. This raises a pair of interesting questions. Number one, would it devalue how distinct Steele's fastball shape is to have a nearly identical fastball shape in Fried's one spot behind him in the rotation? I don't think I really have a great answer to this. We know pitch familiarity is the primary driver of the third time through the order penalty, not something like fatigue, but does that apply across pitchers on back-to-back days, for example? I would think not, but I'm open to hearing other arguments. My lean is that individual pitchers and how they move have a huge implication on how hitters perceive that pitch. So even if the shape is pretty similar, it may not matter if it's thrown by 2 guys who move relatively different. Number 2 is whether 3 lefty starters is too much in one rotation. I think the answer is no here, and I actually think I kind of like 3 lefties in the Cubs rotation. 3 of the other 4 teams in the National League Central were all bottom half of the league in offensive production versus left-handed pitching. The Brewers are also losing Willy Adames. The Cardinals are losing Goldschmidt and Maitrey Arenado. Elly De La Cruz is much better as a left-handed hitter for the Reds. There's a lot of variables here that suggest the Central will still be bad versus lefties again. With all that said, I think Fried is a great fit for the Cubs. They have some money to spend. I think they need a starting pitcher. And although it creates a weird situation where you have two very similar lefty fastballs and three lefties at the top of your rotation, I think that variance is actually a pretty good thing, especially with the quality of the NL Central. But let's go to another team in the Boston Red Sox, who I swear can hang a banner for something this year. They're going to go down in history as the organization that threw the fewest four-seam fastballs and sinkers combined since we started tracking pitch types all the way back in 2008. The impressive thing about this is that it didn't happen at the major league level as a band-aid while their minor leagues were disconnected from what was happening above them. In the minors, the Red Sox threw the second fewest number of four-seam fastballs, specifically just behind the true four-seam haters, the Seattle Mariners. When you combine four-seam and sinker usage in the minors, the Red Sox are also dead last, just like their major league club. And this is a relatively new strategy for the Red Sox, one that kind of occurred in a singular offseason. The Red Sox four-seam and sinker usage fell 13 percentage points as a minor league org from 2023 to 2024, double that of the next team's drop, and dramatically more than the average. The organization has a new tendency under Craig Breslow and Andrew Bailey, and it's something that they perhaps apply to a free agent. One way we can determine who that free agent pitcher might be is by doing a very crude sort. Who in this free agent class has the worst performing four-seam fastball from 2024? And there's one name in particular that jumps out. World Series champion Walker Buehler. For the majority of this season, Buehler's fastball was not good. It had an expected slug over 600 versus left-handed hitters and 450 versus right-handed hitters, where you'd ideally want to hang below 425-ish so you're not purely treading water as a pitcher. The low-hanging fruit for Buehler versus right-handed hitters is to turn him into a pure sinker cutter guy. Move his righty distribution from something like this to something more like this in 2025. Both his sinker and cutter were better from a contact quality standpoint. He zones them both pretty well, and his four-seamer didn't generate enough whiffs to justify 30% or I think even 20% usage versus righties. Versus lefties, I would have Buehler lean even more heavily on his cutter and curveball than he has. This is again mostly based off the idea that we want to throw the pitches that allow the least amount of damage. But there's a big looming question here with Buehler. Did he fix his four-seam fastball in the playoffs? And will that be sticky in 2025? The shape on his four-seam fastball had been declining for the past few seasons, but Buehler's postseason dominance coincided with a rebirth of that shape. The leading theory right now is that the environment had some effect on Buehler, particularly if you look at that Citi Field start where it was both cold and windy. Now, the wind's probably only going to have an effect if it's a crosswind in the direction of the pitch we're talking about. That's a pretty variable thing to assume had a large impact. But in that Citi Field game, you saw a lot of the other pitchers had really accentuated movement. Buehler averaged over 20 inches of vertical break, which we hadn't seen since 2021. And in those cold environments, which you have happened, is less moisture in the air. Now, less moisture in the air means more drag on the baseball for some sciencey reasons. More drag means more movement. And it's also a double negative for hitters because while pitches are moving more, that same drag kills batted ball distance overall. So this is the advantage Buehler had. And one of the reasons I think why he had these really gaudy numbers late in the year, it was probably because of the cold. If I'm a team evaluating Buehler, I really have to hone in on what I think that four-seam shape will look like in 2025, because that's going to have huge implication on how much I'd want him throwing his four-seamer to left-handed hitters specifically. My bet right now is that it pretty much reverts back to the 2024 shape we saw for most of the season. But if I'm the Dodgers, maybe I have a better idea of whether that will happen based on whatever we might have changed with him that wasn't totally connected to the environment. So whether the Dodgers extend him a multi-year offer, I think will be telling based on their belief in that four-seam performance. But regardless of that, I do think he fits pretty well on a Red Sox team that might lose a guy like Nick Pivetta and could use some more starting pitching depth given the injuries and underperformance they ran into in 2024. But this exercise for the Red Sox works on other pitchers as well. How about Frankie Montas and Jack Flaherty, both pitchers who had more average four-seam performances in 2024 and throw their pitch over a quarter of the time? I think both are candidates to pull down that four-seam usage versus right-handed hitters. Montas already has a nasty cutter to help him supplant that usage that the Brewers kind of fixed late last season. And Flaherty has a sinker that for some reason he cuts a bunch of velocity off of relative to his four-seam fastball when he throws it. So maybe there's a world where the World Series champ can keep a sinker around 92 to 93 and seam shift his way to more drop or run, something that it seems like the Red Sox and Andrew Bailey have a track record of doing. I'll emphasize that I don't even really think these are predictions. What I really wanted to do here was look at what organizations are telling us through the data and information that they show on the organization level. Maybe almost try to get in the mind of some of their front office members in terms of how they might value a pitcher more than the market based on these tendencies. Now, of course, the assumption here is that these tendencies continue over the next couple of years or precisely in the next couple calendar months as we get these guys like Fried, Walker Buehler, etc. signed. So I wouldn't say I'm predicting Fried goes to the Cubs and Buehler goes to the Red Sox. I just think they're really good fits based on what the organization has shown. So I hope you enjoyed this video. As always, thank you for watching.